Tractate Avadim is one of the minor tractates. And the first two chapters deal with the sale, acquisition, treatment, and redemption of the Eved Ivri, or a Hebrew indentured servant. And the last chapter deals with an Eved Kanani, or Gentile slave. So, first two chapters plus the last one chapter equals 3 chapters total. So, let's go ahead and get started here. Tractate Avadim, Chapter 1. The regulation regarding a Hebrew slave and a slave whose ear is bored are in force only when the Jubilee is in force. The regulations regarding a field of possession and a field which had been devoted to the temple are in force only when the Jubilee is in force. R. Ishmael said, for that reason it is stated, as a field devoted, the possession thereof shall be the priest's. As possession depends on the Jubilee, so a field which had been devoted depends on the Jubilee. The Jubilee is on the same footing as the New Year in regard to the blowing of the shofar and the benedictions, except that blowing of the shofar on the Jubilee overrides the Sabbath. When did the Jubilee cease to be observed? From the time when Pul and Tiglath-Pileser, kings of Assyria, came up and carried the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh into captivity. Facts to review about the Jubilee, when the Jubilee is in force. So from Deuteronomy 15 to Devarim 15, it reads, every 7th year you shall practice remission of debts. Some important notes, and this shall be the nature of the remission. All creditors shall remit the due that they claim from their fellow Israelites. They shall not dun their fellow Israelites or kin, for the remission proclaimed is of Hashem. So it's important to note that you may dun the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due you from kin. Further references for this are in Shemos 21, where it states, and these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, that person shall serve 6 years, and shall go free in the 7th year without payment. If a male slave came single, he shall leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she had borne him children, and the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. And the reference from King Pul of Assyria is can be seen in 2 Kings 15:19. So King Pul of Assyria invaded the land, and Nahum gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver that he might support him and strengthen his hold on the kingdom. From Vayikra 25:8, where it states, you shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Also in Vayikra 27:21, when it is released in the Jubilee, the land shall be holy to Hashem. As land prescribed, it becomes the priest's holding. From Rachin 29a:15, it can be inferred from the previous discussion that the halachot of dedications are in effect even today. The Gemara raises an objection to this opinion from Abraisa. The sale of a Hebrew slave is practiced only during a period when the Jubilee year is observed, as it is stated. And if your brother be waxen poor with you and sell himself to you, he shall serve with you until the year of Jubilee. That's found in Vayikra 25:39-40. Arachin 32b:16 also states, as it is taught in Abraisa, from the time that the tribe of Reuven and the tribe of Gad had half the tribe of Manasseh were exiled, the counting of the Jubilee years was nullified. As it is stated, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a Jubilee for you, by Vayikra 25:10, indicating that the halachot of the Jubilee year apply only when all its inhabitants are in Eretz Israel, and not when some of them have been exiled. We have additional context here from Tractate Rosh Hashanah 26b:9. Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year is the same as Rosh Hashanah with regard to both the shofar blasts that are sounded and the additional blessings that are recited in the Amidah prayer. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says there's a difference between the 2 days. On Rosh Hashanah, one blows with horns of rams, whereas in Jubilee years, one blows with horns of ibexes. From Tractate Rosh Hashanah 30a:7, Rabbi raised an objection from a Baraisa. The sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year overrides the prohibitions of Shabbat, even in the outlying areas outside the temple. Every man and his house, the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the phrase every man in his house? If we say that it means, as usual, every man and his wife, is a woman obligated to sound the shofar? Isn't sounding the shofar a positive, time-bound mitzvah, i.e., one that can be performed only at a certain time of the day, or during the day rather than during the night, or only on certain days of the year? And the principle is that with regard to any positive, time-bound mitzvah, women are exempt. Let's go ahead and start right back at the beginning here. Chapter 1. The regulations regarding a Hebrew slave and a slave whose ear is bored are enforced only when the Jubilee is in force. The regulations regarding a field of possession and a field which had been devoted to the temple are enforced only when the Jubilee is in force. R. Ishmael said, "For that reason it is stated, as a field devoted, the possession thereof shall be the priest's. As possession depends on the Jubilee, so a field which had been devoted depends on the Jubilee. The Jubilee is on the same footing as the New Year in regard to the blowing of the shofar, and the benedictions, except that the blowing of the shofar on the Jubilee overrides the Sabbath. When did the Jubilees cease to be observed? From the time when Pul and Tiglath-Pileser, kings of Assyria, came up and carried the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh into captivity." A Hebrew slave is acquired by money purchase or by document, and he acquires his freedom by years of service. Years of service in reference in Shemos 21:2. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, that person shall serve 6 years and shall go free in the 7th year without payment. Further commentary coming from Devarim 15:12. If a fellow Hebrew man or woman is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. Goes on to state, through the advent of the Jubilee, and once again, that's going to be speaking about from, you can see from Vayikra 25, Hashem spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign to you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of Hashem. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But the 7th year the land shall have a Sabbath, a complete rest, a Sabbath of Hashem. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. So that's through the advent of the Jubilee, and by dedication of money, i.e., by repaying his master his purchase price less the value of the service he has completed. And that commentary is coming from the William Davidson Talmud. It's what is available on Sefaria.org. And we'll continue here. The Hebrew handmaid has an advantage over him in that she acquires her freedom by the signs of puberty. The Nirza is acquired by the boring of his ear and acquires his freedom through the advent of the Jubilee, or through the death of his master. If a man writes a document of divorce for his handmaid, R. Hanina ben Gamliel says that she does not become free, but the sages say that she does become free if he said to her, "Behold, you are free." The sages say that she does not become free. If one who is about to die says, "My slave so-and-so is free," then he is free. If he wrote a deed of manumission for him, "Behold, this slave is free," the latter should have concern. A man may sell his daughter from one servitude to another, and from one matrimony to another, and from servitude to matrimony, but not from matrimony to servitude. Arshiman said, he may not sell her from one servitude to another, much less from matrimony to servitude. If a man sells his daughter on condition of her not being betrothed by the master, his sale is valid, but his condition is void, because he made a condition overriding what is written in the Torah. And whoever makes a condition which overrides a prescription of the Torah does something which is void. If the father wants to betroth her, and the son wants to betroth her, the father takes precedence. If the son wants to betroth her, and the father to redeem her, the son takes precedence. Because the precept of betrothing takes precedence over the precept of redeeming, as it is stated, "Who hath espoused her to himself? Then shall he let her be redeemed. Two must not be betrothed together. A brother must not betroth her. This had to be mentioned because it might have been argued, seeing that the son who does not take the place of his father to act as lever may betroth her. Does it not stand to reason that one who takes the place of his brother to act as lever should betroth her? Hence the Torah states, and if he espouses her unto his son, thus excluding the brother. If he betrothed her at the end of the 6 years of bondage, should she still be in his possession, she is betrothed, according to the view of R. Shimon ben Eliezer, and if not, she is not betrothed. The sages, however, say that as long as she is in his possession, she is betrothed, since that was the condition on which he paid the money for her at the beginning. If a man sells his daughter and then went and betrothed her to another, he made game of the master, according to R. Yossi ben Yehuda, but the sages say that he has done nothing. Chapter 2. A Hebrew slave does work by day, but not by night. R. Yossi said, it all depends on his occupation. All agree that the master should not teach him to be a dyer, a butcher, or a baker for the public. He should not carry him to the privy, or carry his clothes before him to the bathhouse, or gird his loins for him, massage, or anoint him. He eats the same food and drinks the same drink as his master. He sits at meals with him, even if his stomach is full. If he is beaten or falls ill, the master does not reckon the time of his idleness. But if the slave runs away and returns, he does reckon the time when he was not working. An Israelite may not sell himself in order to obtain clothing or bedding, but he may sell himself to maintain himself alive. When the slave has completed his term of years, he must not be sent away empty-handed, as it is written, and when thou lettest him go free from thee, thou shalt not let him go empty, thou shalt furnish him liberally. R. Eliezer ben Azariah says, if the house is blessed on his account, he is furnished liberally, but otherwise not. R. Akiba says, in either case, the master should not give him less than 50 zuz. We give him as parting gifts anything except slaves, documents, and immovable property. Both a man and woman owner is under the obligation to give parting gifts, but only a man can acquire a Hebrew slave, while a woman cannot acquire a male Hebrew slave. Two slaves should not be bought together, so that a public sale should not be made with two slaves. One who sells himself, one who runs away, and one who gains his liberty by deduction of money does not receive parting gifts. He who is sold for committing a theft should not be sold either in the marketplace or in a bazaar, as it is stated, for unto me the children of Israel are servants. If an Israelite sells himself to Gentiles, his relatives and the Beit Din are commanded to redeem him. But he is not commanded to redeem himself, as it is stated, one of his brethren shall redeem him, or his uncle or his uncle's son shall redeem him. For our Ishmael used to say, seeing that others are commanded to redeem him, must he not be commanded to redeem himself? And if you ask, what do I make of the words, or if he be waxen rich, he shall redeem himself? The meaning is that just as if he redeems himself, he does not return to servitude, so if others redeem him, he does not return to servitude. Ar Yossi and the Galilean said, if the Beit Din sell him, he returns to servitude. But if relatives redeem him, it is for his freedom. While Ar Akiba said, if the Beit Din redeem him, it is for his freedom. But if relatives redeem him, he returns to servitude. If he stole 200 zuz, and his valuation is only a manna, he is sold and sold again. If he stole a manna and his valuation is 200 zuz, he is not to be sold. R. Eliezer said, in no case should he be sold unless his sale price and the amount of his theft are equal. He cannot be sold and sold again for the same theft, and he returns after his servitude to the rank which he formerly held. This is the view of R. Meir, But Ar Yehuda said he does not return to the rank which he formerly held. Chapter 3. The nurse should not have his ear pierced until he declares and repeats his desire to remain in servitude, as it is stated. But if the servant shall plainly say, and this is reference to Shemos 21:5, which states, but if the slave declares, I love my master and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free. And continuing, if the slave has a wife and children, but the master has no wife and children, or if the master has a wife and children, and the slave has no wife and children, he should not have his ear pierced. So if the slave has a wife and children, but the master has no wife and children, or if the master has a wife and children, and the slave has no wife and children, he should not have his ear pierced. That is the view of Ar Ishmael. Ar Akiba said, in either case, he should have his ear pierced. So Ar Akiba states that he should have his ear pierced in either case. Anything may be used for the piercing, even scissors. But the proper instrument for the command to pierce is an awl, A-W-L, it's spelled in English, as it is stated, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl. With midrashic reference to this being from Mekilta, the Rabbi Ishmael 21:6-2, and he shall bring him near to the door or to the doorpost. The door is being compared to the doorpost, just as a doorpost stands in its place. So the door must be standing in its place. If the door, which is not kosher for the mitzvah of mezuzah, is kosher for boring, then the doorpost, which is kosher for the mitzvah of mezuzah, how much more so should it be kosher for boring? It is therefore written, Devarim 15:17, then you shall take the awl and place it in his ear and in the door. You place it in the door, but not in the doorpost. But perhaps the awl is to pierce both his ear and the doorpost. It is therefore written, Shemos 21:6, then his master shall bore his ear with an awl. His ear is pierced and not the door. It is the first reading, then, which is to be accepted. The door is being compared to the doorpost. Just as a doorpost stands in its place, so the door must be standing in its place. So as we're reading, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, he should only be pierced at the top of the ear, according to Ar Meir. But Ar Yehuda said he can be pierced also on the flap. He should be pierced only in the right ear in the presence of the Beit Din. A reference is given for that. Both door and doorpost are mentioned in the verse. Why are they both mentioned? It is to compare the door to the doorpost. As the doorpost is upright, so the door must be upright. A Canaanite slave is acquired by money payment, by written deed, or by seizure, and he acquires his liberty with money which is paid to his master, but others, or with a written document which he receives from him. Such is the opinion of Ar Meir, where the sages said he acquires liberty with money which he himself pays, or with a deed received from him by others, provided only that the money belongs to others. He goes free for loss of a limb, for an eye or a tooth, for the tips of the ears, for the tips of the fingers and toes, for the tip of the nose, for the tip of the membrum, and for the tips of the breasts in a woman. Ar Shimon said, the last mentioned applies also to a man. If the master knocks out 2 of his teeth together, or blinds his 2 eyes together, he goes free, but receives no compensation. If they were knocked out at different times, he gains his liberty for the first and receives monetary compensation for the second. If the master cut off some of his flesh or knocked out a tooth which was about to fall out, he does not go free. A slave of whom an Israelite is part owner is reckoned as a free man. If one sells his slave after 30 days, Ar Meir says that the first owner has the benefit of the law of a day or 2, but not the second. Ar Yehuda says the second also has the benefit. Ar Eliezer said neither has the benefit of a day or 2. Whoever sells his slave to a Gentile or to an Israelite outside the land of Israel, or one who goes free for the loss of a limb, the slave does not require a deed of manumission, Our Akiba says that he doesn't require a deed of manumission.